I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. Talking about the different Buddhas, we are now arriving at the fragrant light Buddha. Um, fragrant light Buddha represents Pure Land Buddhism. And today we will talk about a brief history of the Pure Land Buddhism and the rise of the Pure Land Buddhism, how it transitions from the original Buddhism in India to China and to Japan. Okay. So in a book, very valuable book from Shankara Sita, Survey of Buddhism, he captures almost in a brief way entirety of Buddhism, which is very informative. So I took a bit of that to share with you. In the early days of Buddhism, there was only one form, and then it transitioned into different forms, and then eventually it became devotional Buddhism. Devotional Buddhism here, where it essentially you put more faith in Buddhism for more faith in the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas. And not only in China, in Japan, or in Asia that worshipped Amitabha and Avalokiteshvara, Guanyin Pusa, Wangtian Bhutan, but also in India, I mean, that the worshipping of Amitabha started years ago, even before decades and hundreds of years, even before it started in China. But they did not exist as independent schools. It was just a general aspect of Buddhism to worship Amitabha. And because they knew about the teachings of the Amitabha from the Infinite Life Sutras, that they worship Amitabha, but it was not an independent school. And the devotions to the Buddha, such as Amitabha and Maitreya Buddha Bodhisattva, was recommended by Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna was a very influential philosopher, Buddhist philosopher, who arguably could be said that he revived Buddhism with his work as Mahayana. But it started before that. The movement was already started, but he really was the one that put the wheels in motion, if you will. Tibet, Mongolia, Nepal was still adhering to Indian traditions, but only in China and Japan, when it started to cut the umbilical cord to be separated from the mothership, if you will, and developed its own movement of devotion to Amitabha, thriving and vigorous enough to do so to become its own school. There were other bodhisattvas and Buddhas who were very influential too, such as Kistagaba Dizang Pusa, right, Vương Bồ Tát, and Samanta Bhadra Puxian Pusa, Phổ Hiền Bồ Tát. They were very influential too, but they could never able to rise themselves to the status of independent schools. But incredibly, it was Amitabha that rose to become his own school. And the worshipping of Amitabha later on became as Pure Land Buddhism. So when speaking of devotional Buddhism, it was in effect referring to the worshipping of Amitabha. And even though that was widely spread in India, but not until it got to Japan and China that became its own school. And it was because of the work of the seven fathers, or 祖师, 斗师. Those seven patriots really made a big impression on the Pure Land school. The first two fathers are the Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu. Vasubandhu is Shi Xin Pusa, right? Taitang Bota. They were very influential philosophers. Nagarjuna was the founder of the Mayamaka. Mayamaka, you can say, is like the start of Mahayana, Ta Cheng Pusa, Ta Cheng Fofa. 佛教, Đại thừa Phật giáo. And later on, you have, and then Vasubandhu started or he was you can say the originator of the Yogacara, Weishu, mind only, which is a very interesting subject of its own. And then you have other patriots here, but all these were natives of China, and according to Japan's history, these seven here did not have one important figure in China. And so you see you have all these here, Tanluan, right? And Tao Cao, Dao Cao, and Shan Dao. But there was one that was missing based on the Japanese history anyways, and that was Hui Yuan, Hui Wing. And perhaps it was because he lived before the second patriarch, Vasubandhu, She Xin Pusa. But anyways, he lived before about 333 to 416 C, and She Xin Pusa or Vasubandhu came later on, which was very influential philosopher. But there's a little difference between Chinese history and the Japanese history. And it could be also where he was left out, Hui Yuan was left out from Japanese history was probably because although he was responsible for bringing up that school, but he did not maybe make a big contribution because his goal was to be reborn in the Western Pure Land. So maybe he didn't make a big contributions to the study, to the school. So maybe that's why he was not recognized as one of the major figures. But anyway, in his monastery, there was a pond in his monastery, and it was said that he would never cross that there was the pond, and that pond had white lotus flowers, and so he became known as the White Lotus School. So the white lotus flowers are a prominent feature of the life in the Western Pure Land, right, the Happy Land. And of course, that the lotus is representation of the birth of those who are reborn in the Western Pure Land. So perhaps the white lotus flowers reminded him and the co-practitioners of the beauties of Sukhavati, Jila Sijie, Sukhavati. Sukha, as opposed to dukkha, dukkha is cool, right? Sukha is the opposite. So dukkha is, you can say, suffering, but sukha is happiness. So so it's a happy land. You can call it happy land. And other destinations, such as the ones illustrated by Shan Dao Da Shi, right, Tian Dao, who lived between 1613 and 1681 CE, and it's called a White Path. He has a very famous commentary in the visualizations on the Infinite Life Sutra, Guan Wu Liang Shou Jing, right, one volume, where he likened the chanting of the mindfulness of Amitabha is like walking along this white strip, which is about 4 to 5 feet wide, and you can see on the right hand side, right, it's filled with deep, bottomless body of water, which represents selfish craving. And then on the left hand side, you have this flame, right, torturing those who are staying here very long, so they want to cross as soon as possible under the encouragement of Shakyamuni Buddha. And of course, that is the teachings of the Infinite Life Sutra. And of course, the person here crossing it is the Pure Land practitioner. And all those on this side of this white stripped pathway are, you can call, wrong views, right? Wrong understanding, wrong practice of Buddhism, and wrong views. So a lot of people are holding knives and weapons, and including monastic folks. It's amazing how, maybe I'll zoom in a little bit. You can see here, so not only lay people, but also monastic folks too could have wrong views. All right. Oh, hopefully you can see that. So here's saying that under Shan Dao, Master Shan Dao, he said, it's best to focus on Amitabha and try to cross this as soon as possible. Don't be wasting your time here where you could be influenced by wrong views and get stuck. So that was very influential commentary in the visualization on the Infinite Life Sutra. Under Huiyan's school, which was the White Lotus school, later on, now today we know it as Pure Land School, right? And the fact that in India, the movement of devotions to Amitabha never existed independently, but now in Japan and China, it is now its own school. And there is a difference. So you have different things, people understanding this. And there is another prominent view of Pure Land Buddhism is under Shinran and Jodi Shinshu, which is a Japanese version of the Pure Land Buddhism. It separates the original Indo-Chinese form of Pure Land Buddhism and became its own Japanese offshoot of it. We'll talk about it in a little bit. But in his interpretation, Shinran's interpretation, although it's not separate from the original devotional Buddhism, but it came from the same seed, but it's growing out like a branch separately, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Although it makes it more colorful with another flower on that tree, but it's still limited, it's inadequate. And so how this is all about with Pure Land Buddhism, you have different worlds residing outside of our own world. And of course, the idea that the appearance of Buddhas was not limited to just our present world, but there are other worlds too. So Buddhism is, in a sense, you can say, is ahead of science, because it's now it recognized the existence of other worlds way before we discover. And can you believe that it's only about 100 years or so ago that we start to recognize there are other galaxies in the universe. Before that, we didn't know that. Only 100 years, when they have invented the Hubble telescope, that's when we were able to see beyond our Milky Way galaxy. So it's kind of interesting that the Buddha taught about other worlds 3,000 years ago. Here it says that in Buddhism, the Buddha lands are not limited in terms of time and space. It's kind of unlimited, right? You have this Buddha world that exists successively. I mean, after this Shakyamuni Buddha, you have the Maitreya Buddha, and in the future you have some other Buddha. So that's successive. But at the same time, we have the Western Pure Land, Sukhavati, that exists concurrently with our world. And so it's this coexistence with our world, presided over by different Buddhas. So how is this possible? How is it possible to have multiple world systems existing at the same time? Well, according to Mahayana's teachings, it says that although the Buddha understands the infinity of space, he understands everything that's going on, but his field of knowledge, his yuan, right, yin, is limited to a particular range of world systems. So although he has knowledge of other world systems, but his responsibility is really within his own world system. And that's known as the Buddha field, or Buddha Kestra. And in the visualization on Infinite Life Sutra, it says that although the Buddha, a Buddha knows what it is happening in other Buddha lands, other countries, but his responsibility for maturing and enlightening beings is confined to his own Buddha country because of that affinity, that yuan, right? He understands, but there's not much he can do outside of his realm of affinity, yin. Okay. So we have not just only one Buddha country, a Buddha field, but we have an infinite number of millions of Buddha words outside of this realm too. If you take all that, and generally there are two types. There you have the impure Buddha field and the pure Buddha field. The impure Buddha field, how do you distinguish that? Is that the impure Buddha field contains 6 realms, right? Look down. Right? 6 realms that includes gods, and man, hungry ghosts, and hell, all the suffering. So you have happiness and suffering all mixed together in the 6 realms. In the impure Buddha fields, such as ourselves, we are living in the impure Buddha field because we have the 6 realms. So where not only our world has the 6 realms, but other worlds, other impure worlds also have 6 realms too. So we're not unique. Any world system that has the 6 realms, sufferings and happiness all mixed together, that is impure Buddha field. Okay. On contrast, the pure Buddha field is accompanied by bodhisattvas, by gods, and by man, and they have the apparitional birth, right? Like transformational birth, and all of whom have male bodies. Of course, we should understand that this is not meant to be gender-based, but traditionally, definitions of a male masculinity represents flawless characteristics, such as emotional strength, determinations, and non-ill will. Those are strong, admirable characteristics, and so they are male. As opposed to female, where the definition is the opposite. So we shouldn't take this definition or this description to be gender-based, but it describes flawlessness as opposed to being with flaws. Right? Sukhavati is a place of Amitabha, and it is a Buddha field of its own. It's called a pure Buddha field, but it is not the only one. There are many other Buddha fields in the universe. How it created was because of Dhammakara. Right? Dhammakara was a being who, through the power of his cultivations and the support of his mentor Buddha, also came to realizations, and from his vows that he established Sukhavati. And this was told to us by Shakyamuni Buddha. Our word is called Shaha Loka. Shaha Sopo, it's a name of this, mean endurance or tribulation, a lot of troubles, a lot of fun now, a lot of, it's a word that's full of afflictions and suffering. So tribulations. Or Loka means war. So Saha war is, that's ours, a war of full of tribulation, full of sufferings. Why is it that Amitabha had to establish this Sukhavati? And next time when we have a chance, probably the next lecture, we'll talk about the story behind Dhammakara, how he became Amitabha and established the Western Pure Land. But what was the reason for him to establish the Western Pure Land? Well, the reason for this, if you think about it, all right, I mean, the reason for establishing the Pure Land is really why Shakyamuni Buddha established the Sangha. And it is because he wanted to create an environment where a person could reach enlightenment in a more suitable way. If you look at it, I mean, the laymen, practitioners, for them to attain advanced stages of the transcendental path, enlightenment, it is full with distractions and it's practically impossible, right? Whenever that we open our eyes, we listen to the world, all we hear are distractions, pulling us away from that transcendental path. That transcendental path there, it is, although we heard about it, we may have learned about it, but it is practically impossible for us to attain it. Because we have domestic responsibilities, social obligations, we have to make a living, have to go to work, and therefore it is incompatible with the perfect observance of precepts of morality, and not to speak of practicing one-pointedness meditation. This is not to say that living in this world, that having a job is not compatible with our cultivation. Of course, there is a possibility of attaining enlightenment while holding a job, and as long as we can learn from it. But it's not easy. It will take a lot of effort, a lot of concentration, and many people don't fit that criteria. And therefore, the Buddha was so compassionate enough to open another avenue so that those who could not follow the difficult path could still attain enlightenment, right? And of course, this we need, even though we may have opportunities to attain enlightenment here, but because of distractions, that it makes the efforts very difficult. And being the track of all trades, master of none, is going to be very difficult. You have to really focus. And if you want to be successful in the mindfulness of Amitabha, you really have to observe the precepts, practice meditation, and uncover your wisdom. Those 3 steps need to be performed, and it's not very easy, especially for those who have jobs that prevent them from wholly appear in a way to observe the precepts. It's very difficult. So the purpose for which the Sangha was founded by Shakyamuni Buddha, for those who felt the pull of the transcendental, they have this interest towards liberation, towards enlightenment. But for them to be successful, an ideal environment is needed, and to live a holy life. And when we join the Sangha, when we're part of the Sangha, and better yet, when we are in the Sukhavati, we are in an environment where it is much easier to attain enlightenment. And that is the whole reason why Sukhavati was created in the first place. Right, so Pure Land is established on exactly the same principle as when Shakyamuni Buddha 3,000 years ago established the Sangha. An opportunity for those who have not realized enlightenment can realize enlightenment. Right? So seeing how hard it is for sentient beings, burdened as they are with the miseries of mundane existence, and even to hear the Dhamma is difficult, much less practicing it. Right? And we have so many obstructions, so many challenges, so many distractions awaiting us to pull us down, to prevent us from being successful. Realizing that Bodhisattva, our compassion, create this Buddha fields for us to help us. And with this ideal environment, it is very conducive towards higher degree of development of the consciousness. So Amitabha making the attainment of Buddhahood contingent upon the establishment of the Buddha field. So he said that I will not attain enlightenment unless the Western Pure Land is created, and for all sentient beings, right? And the criteria are relatively simple, according to the Infinite Life Sutra. By observing a few elementary ethical precepts, or with the desire to migrate to the Western Pure Land, one can be successful. Or in the Amida Sutra, the simpler version of it, one can simply invoke his name and take rebirth in the Western Pure Land. So Sukhavati here is a kind of a cosmic Sangha, right? Much more perfect than the one that we have here on earth. There are advantages of being in the Sukhavati. One is that in that environment, in the spiritual kingdom, it's free from evil destinies. In other words, there are no more issues with the Buddha with falling into the three evil realms, and that there would not be any problems with food and clothing and just to make a living. None of that will of that issue that a practitioner would have to be to worry about. And the best thing about it is that attainment of enlightenment is assured. There is no falling back. And no matter how long it will take you to do so, millions of years, you will never fall into three evil realms, and that you are destined to supreme Buddhahood, right? And this is kind of similar to Hinayana. Hinayana has a similar Pure Land, if you will, called Pure Abad. They have called Suha Vasa. In Hinayana, where a person who has attained Anagaman, which is a non-returner, the third fruit of sagehood, after they pass away from this lifetime, they are reborn in the a pure abode called Suhavasa, and that belongs to the form. So, right, our world is divided into three realms: the realm of desire, realm of formed, and realm of formlessness. The pure abads are here in the realm of form. And from there, there's no regression. From there, they continue to progress until they reach nirvana, until they reach the arhatship. There are differences between these teachings and that of Mahayana. In the Hinayana's teachings, Xiao Cheng, right, Diutu, Suha Vasa, or pure abad, is in the realm of form, but for Sukhavati, it's neither in the realm of form, realm of desire, realm of form, or realm of formlessness. It's none of those. In Hinayana, Anagaman is attained is because of their practice, and that's how they're reborn there. But the difference is that for a person to be reborn in the Western Pure Land, Sukhavati, it is not on their own merits, but by the power of Amitabhas. So there is the help. Whereas on the other side, with in Hinayana, you have to go there on your own. Whereas the success of a Pure Land practitioner is with the help of Amitabha. So you can see, normally it's been interpreted that a Pure Land is divided into 4 sections. You have the community land, is a mixture of both mundane beings and sages. And then you had Hinayana's enlightenment land and Maha Bodhisattva adornment land. Those who can, this is with the Hinayana mindset, and this is with the Mahayana mindset, Bodhisattvas. And then here is where you surpass that to become Buddhahood in a sense, in Vairocana, light pure land. Okay. Sukhavati is it's called the easy path to nirvana, and Suhavasa, which is Hinayana, Xiao Cheng, right? It's called the difficult path because you have to exercise it on your own as opposed to receiving help. The reason that's easy is because you don't have to traverse up through outside of the realm of desire, realm of form, and realm of formlessness to get outside of the samsara. But from the realm of desire, you can cut sideways towards Western Pure Land and be outside of the samsara, right? The cycle of life and death. The teachings of Shinran, which is a Japanese school of Pure Land, differs from the understanding of the traditional understanding of Western Pure Land. And that is because they assert that Sukhavati is itself the ultimate goal, meaning there's no anything else beyond that. So the purpose of them practicing Buddhism is to go to the Western Pure Land, and that's it. Whereas in other schools of Mahayana, say you go to the Western Pure Land to further your study, and you continue until you reach enlightenment, until you reach Buddhahood, and that is not all, but you continue to help other sentient beings. So that's one difference between the Shinran, which is Japanese Pure Land school, and the other sect of the Pure Land school in Mahayana. And they deny the transcendental content of Buddhism in this lifetime. In other words, they say that there is no way for a person on this world, in this world, to attain enlightenment. The only way to get enlightenment is to go to Western Pure Land. And of course, this is also a painful relapse into the crudities of popular deism. Deism is the belief that of one God, the creator. So they believe similar to maybe to other deistic belief that there is a world created by a God, by somebody, and that is true, and everything else is false. We'll talk about it because this is a serious concern for us to understand. So we'll come back to this. Okay. There are doubts, though. People who are not well versed in the Pure Land school will have doubts, and there are a couple of common doubts. One is, does the Pure Land really exist? Right? And is it possible that for Dhammakara to create this out of his thoughts? Because when he was practicing still as a bodhisattva, according to this scripture, he cast vows, and so he created this land from his vows, from himself, from his merits. So there are people who doubt this. Say, is it possible? Is it possible to have this Pure Land? And is it possible for anybody to go there? And it's possible for him to just create this, all right? So that's one doubt. The second doubt is it possible for a being to be reborn in the Western Pure Land by simply invoking the name of Amitabha, right? So that's the second doubt. So in his book, Shankarasita, he addressed the first doubt. The first doubt is whether does the Pure Land exist? That's the first doubt. And if we look at on the principle of karma, this, then with its corollary that the sphere of one's rebirth is determined by one's deeds. And so that's easy to understand. And Dr. Edward Kahns, he also answered this in his book. He said that whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, it is determined by their deeds, the karma. Right? The worldly things that we see and sense, they are a kind of reflex of people's deeds. They are reaction, their creation is in a sense from our deeds, from our karma. And the environment that we are together is because of our collective karma, that we come together, that we have the same spirit. And we have the same motivation. Just like the United States, Mr. Chen last night in his lecture, he mentioned that whether we have Los Angeles, California, or New York, they come together because of their collective karma that creates the environment that they're in. And therefore, their attitude is also different. Right? The attitudes that we have here are different from the attitudes that people have in New York and people who have in other countries. So because of our same motivations that we create this environment. And therefore, Dr. Kahn's answer to this first doubt is that because of karma that creates the environment, so because of the great virtues of those in the Sukhavati that, in a sense, they have created the environment of Sukhavati. And when the saying is birds of a feather flock together, right? They people who have common interests would come together to create that environment. And the existence of the so-called supernormal powers, right? He created this from his essentially supernormal powers, and the creative power of thought. And is that even possible? Another aspect to look at this is that one who has gained the fourth jhana, right, 四禅, they have the ability to replicate their physical body. They can multiply their bodies. They have that supernatural power. Therefore, in other words, they can materialize natural objects of every kind. In other words, they can convert mass into energy and energy into mass. So when they create another body of their own, they are converting energy into mass, essentially. Okay? And then there's an example of the Tibetan monk, very well known, Tamo Gashi Rinpoche. He was born in 1866, and he died around 1936, so in the late 30s. And that was a great event that was created by his presence. It says that when he was traveling in Tibet with his Shentuan, with his group, Stangdong, with his followers, he caused to appear in the skies a wonderful phantasmagoria. Phantasmagoria is like a picture from the skies, and when you look in the clouds, and it was very clear picture of Maitreya Buddha, Mila Pusa Yilak Bota, and with all his attendant bodhisattvas in the skies. And this was visible for miles around and lasted for several hours. And not only that, there were flowers resembling lotuses came falling down onto earth. And they were real enough to be picked up and to be handled. And of course, they melted into the air after about an hour or so. So this was witnessed by hundreds of people and has been depicted in the White Conch Shell Monastery in Chumbi Valley, southern Tibet. So in this monastery, they embalmed his body, the Rinpoche's body, and decorated with golds and different adornments. And those who were eyewitnesses to this miraculous event were still alive, I guess at the time of the writing of this book. And so we should not take this united testimony lightly, right? We should not just reject it, but these were events, supernatural events that occurred, although in short period of time, but they were very real because they could be sensed, they could be picked up, and they could be seen. So if it's possible to produce a phantasmagoria that lasted a few hours and could be seen by hundreds of people, then it should be possible to produce something like this that can last for centuries, right? It can last for millions, right? If something that can last for an hour or two, then there is a possibility that it can last for much longer period of time. And so with the power, the thought power of Amitabha, of a perfect being with infinite merits and virtues, certainly he has the ability to create a Buddha field that can last for millions and millions of eons, right? Millions and millions of time, of years, right? So it is a realm of possibility. In the smaller Sukhavati Dhammita Sutra, it says that there are tribes of birds that sing in the groves of Sukhavati that have been made on the purpose of Amitabha. Essentially, he creates those birds, right? It says in the sutra very clearly that he creates those birds to utter the sound of the law, right? To preach the Dhamma. So within this realm of possibility, is it possible for a Buddha to create a land from his thoughts? Certainly is, from his abilities, from his merits and virtues, right? So that should, in a way, satisfy the curiosity of the first doubt. The second doubt is that the second doubt is, can a person who just by invoking the name Amitabha be reborn in the Western Pure Land? And here it says that it says that devotional Buddhism does not maintain that birth in the Pure Land takes place without a cause. So there is cause and causality, right? Cause and effect, 因果, right? But the primary factor in its causation is the invocation of the name Amitabha, by chanting Amitabha, by being mindful of Amitabha. And so that we cannot say that it's without a cause, without principle, right? It's not something that you just think of. What does it mean by invocating the name Amitabha? What do you mean by chanting or be mindful of Amitabha? Right? Yesterday's lecture, Mr. Chen explained this to us. Vow number 18 of Amitabha, it says that the meaning of chanting Amitabha should have criteria, right? There are criteria and conditions for it. The first criteria is that you have this faithful joy, right? Faith, belief in me, which is the Buddha, with serene thoughts, right? 自心信乐, right? Let me put down here. So this is the Chinese version of it and the Vietnamese version. So in chanting Amitabha, being mindful of Amitabha, you need to have this condition, which is to have joyful faith, and also the earnest to be reborn in that country, in the Buddha land. And then from there, you can chant 10 times, 20 times, how many times you want. But the basic criteria are, one, have this serene thought or faithful, joyful faith, and the other is the wish to be reborn in the Western Pure Land. So cause and conditions, right there, right? But it's not the Amitayas Dhanas, which is the visualizations of on Infinite Life Sutra, 观无量寿经, or 玩无量陀经, 玩无量陀当. It says that even one has committed 10 evil deeds, and the 5 deadly sin can be reborn there. But then when we say, is that even possible to have committed such great offenses and still be able to reborn in the Western Pure Land? Well, one way to answer this is that if karma is interpreted in a strictly individualistic sense, then it's unanswerable. Meaning that if karma is fixed, if that person has committed karma, evil karma, and it has its nature, 自性, right? We just talked about the nature, then it cannot be changed because it exists on its own, which is in a way meaningless or unanswerable. If you look at it from that perspective where it has its own nature, then it cannot be changed. So a person who has created evil deeds, and if the evil deeds have their own nature, then you cannot change the deeds into something else. And therefore, that would not jive with the Anatman, Sunnada's doctrines, no self, the doctrine of no self or emptiness. Karma needs conditions and environments in order to come to fruition. You may have created an evil deed, but if there are no conditions, there are no environments, then those deeds will not come to fruition. So the phenomena that we have are not fixed, unchanging nature. They are changeable. So things can always change based on conditions. So it is possible for a person to have committed evil deeds, offenses, to have rebirth in the Western Pure Land because nothing has fixed, unchanging self, right? It does not mean that we are encouraged to make offenses, to go out and create offenses. That's not what is meant here. From a non-individualistic interpretation, 无我, right, vô ngã, from that perspective, then you can use the method of merit dedication, 回向, 回hướng, right? Parinamana. You can use that method to transfer one's person's merit to benefit other people. And so that's a transference of a person who can resonate with you. You can transfer that merit and enable that person to rise above the obstructions that they may be facing or they have created for themselves. It is said that Amitabha's stock of merits are so immense, infinitely immense, incalculable, that even after he has used the merits to create his word, there are still remaining surplus merits to be shared with sentient beings. So when we identify ourselves with Amitabha, a portion of his merits is transferred to us. And it is more than enough to counterbalance our past evil deeds, but it can also ensure our rebirth in the Pure Land, right? It has enough to pick us out of the hole that we have dug for ourselves, but fly into the skies, if you will. Right? So when we practice Pure Land Buddhism and we are reborn in the Western Pure Land, it does not mean that the law of cause and effect has been suspended for our benefit. It doesn't mean that we take exceptions to the law of cause and effect. The law of cause and effect, the law of karma, is still operating. The law of conditionality is still operating. It's just that we have better utilized the law of conditionality by giving ourselves the proper conditions for our merits to grow and our evil karmic seeds to be suspended in a sense, to not have opportunities to grow. For example, you have salt. And it's very salty, you cannot drink salty water, but you can add more water to dilute it, and therefore it's drinkable now, right? You have not really gotten rid of salt, but you have added more water to dilute it to a point where it is drinkable. Another example is you may not have the ability to cross a body of water, but if you jump onto a boat, then the boat can take you over, right? You may not have the ability, even as small as a grain of sand, it will sink down to the bottom. But if you have created a lot of evil karma, it's like a big heavy rock. There is no way for it to cross the body of water. It will sink down to the bottom. But if you are to put that big rock onto the boat can carry you over. So the boat here represents the merits, the vows of Amitabha, right? The powers of Amitabha. In the Indo-Chinese form of Pure Land doctrine, Sakuvati is outside of the realms of the samsara, outside of three planes, the planes of desire, the plane of form, and the plane of formlessness. Okay. It cannot be said to exist absolutely, but only in relative sense. So this Sakuvati is as relative as the world that we are living in. Because this world that we are living in, that we think exists, is because of our senses, right? We interacted. And some people will not perceive it the same way. Some people perceive this world very happily. Some people perceive this world in a very negative way too, right? So the world that we have, we cannot say it absolutely exists. It's relative. So the Pure Land is also relative as well. And so it exists because of our merits. It exists because we resonate with the vows, the aspirations of Amitabha, right? So there are two truths, relative truth and absolute truth, right? It's right here. According to Shinran's interpretation, Sukhavati and Nirvana are identical, not because Nirvana is mundane for him, but it's simply transcendental. Therefore, he expresses the absolute truth in his teachings. It's called the True Pure Land School. So we will go into the difference of how that's different from the Indo-Chinese original form of Pure Land School. But just a quick review before we dive deep into this, so that you don't forget what I just shared with you. The India's devotional Buddhism, right? When it came to China and Japan, it became an independent school called Pure Land School that we know today. There were 7 fathers or portraits, 主师, 斗师, 7 fathers that made contribution to this study and became Pure Land School. There are 2 types of words, the impure words and the pure words. Ours is called impure because we have the samsara, the six realms, whereas the Buddha land Sukhavati is pure word because it has no evil realms. And Amitabha Sukhavati is the most popular of the Buddha fields. Why is there a need for Sukhavati? Well, because the Buddha is so compassionate to create a non-regressive environment for us to reach enlightenment. There are too many distractions here. Whereas in the Western Pure Land Sukhavati, our focus wouldn't have to worry about anything else. Our focus is to attain enlightenment. And of course, there are doubts, and whether it exists or not, and can anybody be reborn there? And so we just discussed those points. Okay, any comments? Okay, all right, so now let's go into the different thinking and a branch that offshoot into off from the tree, from the roots. So before reviewing the main features of the Pure Land myth in the light of Shinran's transcendentalism, let's look at the life of Shinran a little bit. Let's understand him a little bit. He was born in the year of 1173, and at the age of 99, he died in the year of 1262, so 90 years old. In the early days, he devoted a number of years to mastering sutras and sastras, explanations of the sutras. But it did not satisfy him. He could not get any nearer to enlightenment, so he was kind of frustrated, if you will. Shinran happened to meet Honen Shonin, another sage revered by Japanese practitioners. He initiated Shinran into the repetition, the recitations of mantra Namo Amitabhaya, Buddhaya. And when he met this practice, he resonated with it, and his troubled heart found peace. So he really liked this method. But then after he learned this method, he renounced his monastic vows to become a monk. He did not follow his monastic vows anymore. But he spent the remaining 60 years of his life preaching to the common people about chanting Amitabha. And in the year 2025, he established the Jodo Shinshu, the largest of the Japanese branches of the Mahayana, possessing more temples and preachers and claiming more adherents than any other. So far as propagating the Dhamma is concerned, Japanese devotional Buddhism is on the whole more active than 3 other most important schools of Mahayana put together. So they are very active. In the Western countries, its efforts to enlarge the sphere of Buddhist influence are paralleled only by those of the modern Theravada. So they have a huge influence in Buddhism. Sukhavati and Nirvana, according to Shinran, are synonymous. They're the same. And enlightenment of a nirvana is only after death, cannot be attained in a lifetime. And that nirvana or the Pure Land or the Pure Land Sukhavati is complete unsurpassed attainment. So to him, that's the ultimate goal of just to go to the Western Pure Land. Okay. Now, all schools of Buddhism, regardless of yana, which is whatever schools that they are in, unanimously hold that with the exception of anagamins, the third stage of statehood, and the beings reborn in Sukhavati, enlightenment takes place during one's actual lifetime. In other words, nirvana is attainable here and now. It's possible now. But Shinran believed that it was not possible to attain enlightenment in this lifetime, only in the Western Pure Land. So while in theory he did not deny this teaching that nirvana is attainable here and now, but he minimized its importance by asserting that humanity, having seriously degenerated since the days of our historical Shakyamuni Buddha, that attainment was now within hardly anybody's reach. And therefore, seeking to attain rebirth in Sukhavati or enlightenment, not during our workday lives, not in present life, but after death, at the moment of death. All that we should seek to attain is awakening to the faith of Amitabha. In other words, at the last moment of your life, and you could awake the faith of Amitabha, then you will be reborn into the Western Pure Land, and you will reach enlightenment there, right? So by this awakening of faith will be produced an effect which, manifesting at the instant of death, will act as the conditions for our immediate realizations of nirvana. So that's his thinking. So this, in a way, has led to the confusion that one can do whatever one wants during one's lifetime, and then as a last moment of one's life, one can just chant Amitabha, and then whew, you fly away and you become enlightened in the Western Pure Land. But we should understand that such abrupt change is practically infinitely impossible. Right? It's very difficult to just change yourself. If you don't live a life of preparation, it's not easy just at the last moment of your life to just change abruptly. In Shinran's usage, the death and nirvana are synonymous. They're the same thing. Shinran claimed, he claimed only to interpret the words of the scriptures. He said, hey, I got this understanding from the scriptures. I didn't make this up. So evidence is there, even in the Pali canon, that the Buddha himself had recognized the possibility of nirvana at the moment of death, maybe from some stories. He simply drew attention to until now neglected aspect of the Buddha's teaching. In other words, he said that he got this interpretation from the scriptures. Since the attainment of rebirth in nirvana at the moment of death, it is possible, but it has to be the axle upon which it revolves our entire spiritual life. In other words, you have to live a life of preparation in order to have that faith at the last moment. You can't just go your happy way, enjoying life, not even chanting Amitabha, and then at the last moment you chant Amitabha, and then you're gone and you're liberated. So logically, it doesn't make sense. We should understand that what he's saying is not completely inaccurate, because it is possible at the last moment that you can attain enlightenment. But there needs to be conditions, right? People have misunderstood that to say, hey, I don't need to worry about it. At the last moment, I can just chant Amitabha and I'm done. The awakening of the faith in Shin Buddhism is an instant of pure egolessness. Yeah, you reach enlightenment because you have achieved the egolessness, the state of egolessness. That is true, right? And he said that any attempt to gain enlightenment on our own efforts will only strengthen the sense of separateness, meaning like funbe, right? Separateness. You will need to have unconditional surrender in order to realize that. And by the word Amitabha, Shinran does not denote any particular personality. The compassion of all Buddhas appear to our ego distorted perceptions as a force. Here is saying that there's no point in putting your own efforts. You have to just rely on Amitabha completely, the compassion Amitabha completely in order to be liberated. But if you are trying to interfere with that external power, then you are just increasing your own ego, and you are really interfering with the work of nature here. Shinran makes it clear when he says what is called external power is as much as to say there is no discrimination of that. There's no discrimination, no 分别. So to surrender to the other power means to transcend the distinction between object and subject, which is true. In an egoless sense, it's true. There's no distinction. As we identify ourselves with Amitabha, Amitabha identifies himself with us, and there's not a transfer of merits, but of the power of the non-discrimination. It's just a natural phenomenon, I guess. And eventually we get carried to nirvana. So compassion is co-eternal with absolute and not limited by time. So Amitabha is enlightened. We also must be enlightened. We are eternally enlightened. Only through ignorance do we think of ourselves as unenlightened beings. I think there are two issues with this understanding. One is that when we think that we are eternally enlightened, then that means it suggests that there is something that pre-exists before us, right? There's something that pre-exists. That's like 自性, the nature that exists on its own, because it's internally there, right? The second issue that I have with this is that it suggests that the state of enlightenment is reversible. Because I guess at one point we were enlightened and now we're no longer enlightened, so it's reversible. So that means that whatever the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha had achieved is not real and it's meaningless because it's reversible. There's no guarantee that you can stay in the state of enlightenment forever. So I take two issues with this understanding. One is that it suggests that there's something that can exist on its own. And the other is that the state of enlightenment is reversible, right? So that's my understanding. That's the issues that I have with that. The teachings of Shinran Shonin in particular are a transpositions of the whole doctrine from intellectual to emotional mode. So in other words, it doesn't care about reading sutras, understanding the principles. All you have to do is cast rise to that devotion to faith, and you're good. You're being taken care of. Of course, the advantage of this is that it's very motivating, right? It depends on how you see it. It could be very motivating. I don't have to do anything and I'm going to be safe. So it's very motivating. There's no stress. You don't have to put in a lot of effort. So that's one advantage. But the disadvantage is that although it sounds nice, but it's completely false. Because the conclusion that one should make, conclude that one should make no efforts, no attempt at all to gain enlightenment through one's own effort. So completely relying on Amitabha's compassion. And you don't have to do anything. Just hop onto the bus and the bus will drive you there. You don't have to worry about who's driving you, whether it's on the right route or not. You think that's going to take you to the right destination. Under this misunderstanding, Shinran and his followers renounced the monastic ideal, including that indispensable prerequisites of any form of higher spiritual life and the observance of celibacy. So this is very serious. People who engage in all kinds of evil deeds, stealing, sexual misconduct, and like that, and they think it's okay because at the end of their lives, they can just chant Amitabha and they will be saved. So that's a serious misunderstanding of the teachings of Pure Land Buddhism. Right? So this is wrong because the desired fruit that we want to achieve is not consistent with the conditions that we are creating now. Right? We're not living as spiritually, but we want spirituality, spiritual liberation, which doesn't make sense. It does not coincide, does not jive with the law of conditionality. And because it has no substance, whatever we want, yeah, we have aspiration for enlightenment, but we're not working towards it. There's no substance in our goal, right? And they said, here says, even the repetitions, 念佛, the repetition or recitations of Amitabha was regarded not as a spiritual exercise, but as spontaneous expression of devotees' feelings of intense gratitude to Amitabha for having already accomplished our enlightenment. So the understanding is we have been enlightened already, and we're just causing trouble for ourselves by just chanting Amitabha, because we're interfering with Amitabha's vows power by putting our own efforts. So don't need to be bothered by that. Just go on your own way, do your own things, and at the end of your life, chant Amitabha and you'll be safe. So that, it sounds nice, right? You don't have to put any effort and you'll be safe, but it's wrong. It's not correct understanding. So what do we do? What do we do? Reliance upon other power, 他力, and upon one's own efforts, 自力, 得力, needs to go hand in hand. They may seem incompatible, but they must go hand in hand. We have to put our own efforts. We have to initiate the first step, and then we will receive help from Amitabha. Right? It's not just like folding your arms, sit back and relax, and then the bus will drive you to your destination. But we have to vigorously practice the threefold path of morality, 三学为三好. Morality, meditation, and wisdom, 戒定慧. We have to vigorously, diligently practice the threefold path. One must reflect that in reality, one can do nothing, and that gaining enlightenment is dependent upon the compassion of Amitabha. And that is very true. At the same time, we have to rely on, we have to put in our efforts and rely on the compassion of Amitabha to get us there. Right? That's the middle path. So Buddhism is a whole and must be followed as a whole, and not just to pick the things that you want to see and hear and just and blindly follow. It must be taken as a whole. I mean, some people even vow to never study any other school, any other methods besides Pure Land School. They say, I would never chant another Buddha's name. I only want to chant Amitabha. And that's fine if that's our own practice. But if we want to help Buddhism flourish, we have to embrace, we have to be tolerant of other people's thinking, studies as well. We cannot claim that our study is the best and other studies are false, because that divides Buddhism. That disintegrates Buddhism, because people will not accept us, we cannot accept them. We'll go our own way, and Buddhism is not united, right? It's separated. It will disintegrate. And so Buddhism is all of the schools that put together. And not just one school, but all the schools. The beauty of Buddhism is colorfulness, right? It's not just one color, but all the colors of the rainbow. That's what makes Buddhism beautiful. But if we say Buddhism is red only, we're ignoring other colors, then although we are not wrong, but we are not complete. And we are not doing justice to Buddhism. We are hurting Buddhism as a whole by picking out what we want and to say that is Buddhism. No, it is not Buddhism. Buddhism is all-encompassing. So not only must faith be balanced by wisdom. We cannot just have faith alone, but we have to have wisdom to learn the principles. Why are we chanting Amitabha? Why do we want to go to the Western Pure Land? right? Mr. Chen yesterday reminded us, when we study Pure Land Buddhism, why do we want to study that? And what motivates us to want to go to the Western Pure Land? Otherwise, at the last moment of our lives, we can be confused because we don't have that clarity of the path. Concentration, meditation, balanced by vigor. Well, when you concentrate, you're not exercising much, but there needs to be vigor. It needs to be balanced by jingjin, vigor, diligence. In the spiritual life of individual Buddhists, but in the Dharma as a whole, equilibrium must be maintained, right? Not only our spiritual life, whatever that we practice is our own responsibility, and we should pick a method that is suitable for us. We should not go and try to study all branches of Buddhism. That's gonna not be very helpful to us. And that's our personal choice. That's fine. But if we are to introduce Buddhism with others, we have to be accommodating, right? It is said that if you want to kill yourself, all you need to do is just use a knife and just kill yourself. Very easy, one simple knife. But if you want to conquer an army, you have to use all kinds of weapons, right? So if we want to be successful ourselves, we should focus on one method, yes. But we should also have an open mind, open heart to other methods too. And if we have the opportunity to share Buddhism with others, we should be knowledgeable of other things, be observant of other things, not just know one and just continue to repeat over and over, because people will lose interest. But if we don't have the opportunity to propagate Buddhism, then we can just specialize one area. But if we have the opportunity, we have that responsibility to grow Buddhism, to develop Buddhism, then we have to take on the responsibility of knowing more than just what our practice. So there is a balance we need to maintain. So I'm not saying to not focus. We should focus to be successful for our own development, but in the interest of helping other people, because other people will not have the same interests as we do. We should be well-rounded enough to interact with them, to share with them, to learn from them, to accept them, and therefore they can accept us. Right? Otherwise, Buddhism will be very superfluous. Right? We should, to avoid this, we should avoid two extremes. One is to be completely self-dependent and just to focus on one thing and to not bother with anything else. The second extreme is to be completely dependent on others, right? Ta li. So there needs to be a balance between self-power and other power, right? Talak, batulak. So let's summarize before we end here. So the Buddha established, Shakyamuni Buddha introduced to us the Amitabha and his Buddha land, Sukhavati. And there is a need for Sukhavati because of the non-regressive environment towards enlightenment. There are just way too many distractions here. And if we are serious towards spiritual liberation, we should focus. If we don't focus, we don't put in efforts, then we're not going to be able to gain the momentum to overcome distractions. Secondly is reliance upon other power and upon one's own efforts must go hand in hand. So we avoid those two extremes and maintain the middle path. And thirdly is to be diligent in our practice, right? The threefold path: morality, meditation, and wisdom. We should be serious about our practice, focus on our practice, and put into practice of what we learn, not just to learn the principles, but to really put into practice. And that gaining enlightenment is dependent upon the compassion of Amitabha. We cannot, this is a better choice in terms of ensuring success, right? So rely upon Amitabha's compassion and his ability to help us. At the same time, we put in our own effort to get there.
Does it make sense? All right, any comments? All right, so next week, next time we come, we'll share a story with you about Dhammakara Bhikkhu, who later on became Amitabha. So his story of how he became Amitabha and the land of the Sukhavati. Okay. All right, let's do merit dedication. If you could please join your palms. Together we recite, may the merits and virtues accrued today adorn the Buddha Pure Lands, repay 4 types of kindness above, and aid those suffering in the paths below. May those who see and hear of this bring forth the resolve for the Bodhi mind. When this retribution body is complete, together we shall meet in the land of ultimate bliss. If you could please rise, we bow to the Buddha 3 times to show our respect. First bow, second bow, and third bow. Amida Society. Please stay back for lunch.